Welcome to Bellingham City Council. I call this meeting to order for September 8th, 2014. There will be a public hearing on the rental safety program on Monday, October 27th here in council chambers at 7 p.m. Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Meetings Act. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Jean Knutson.
Here.
Kathy Lehman.
Here.
Michael Lillquist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Jack Weiss.
Here.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Linda. It was a nice break. It's good to be back. We're going to start with our 15-minute public comment period. I will read the name of folks in order that they've signed up. Feel free to come up and form a line at the door down the hallway there, and then step up to the mic. Introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak on any topic you like this evening, except for the item that is up for a public hearing, which is consideration of the Bureau of Justice grant. So we'll start with Ken Holmes, followed by Christopher Bruce Deal and Bruce Smith.
My name is Ken Holmes. I'm from Bellingham. This weekend I read an article in the paper about derelict crab traps and how they keep trapping crabs and killing crabs. The city's involving itself in that. But what bothered me about it when I read it is that the city is considering passing a rental safety ordinance. And in my opinion, this ordinance is just going to be a derelict ordinance. It's going to trap money out of the pockets of citizens, and you still have not come up and given us good reasons. You say safety this year. You haven't done that in years past. But you say safety, and yet you have done nothing to point out what these safety things are. What data? You say you don't have any data. If you pass this and you have no data before you pass it, how are you going to determine whether you're succeeding with it down the line? Or are you just going to trap this money out of the pockets of consumers, which would be spent in businesses which support the community? I don't understand how you can pass an ordinance that you haven't even established a need for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Christopher Bruce Deal, followed by Bruce Smith and Sean Hegstad.
Hi, my name is Christopher Bruce Diley. I'm going by my full name just so as not to confuse this issue. It's it's regarding the proposed reintroduction of the grizzly bears into the Cascades. And as this ties into Bellingham, the city of Bellingham, is the public safety issue regarding if they do indeed reintroduce the grizzlies, what's happening, and I'll show this on the overhead right now, is the U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife all endorsed the pamphlet called Be Bear Aware, which recommends bear spray for bear attacks. And if you look up there, that's the counter-assault bear spray. And if people recall, I was here over 2 years ago, and I spoke at the city council here and described how we were attacked by a bear up in Alaska, and that's the exact can that I used. And I sprayed the bear in the charge, and the bear knocked me down. It was growling and snarling in my face, waving its paw threateningly at my head, which I couldn't see its paw. But my friend was standing behind me, and he filled me in later and told me that that's what was happening. All I could see was a bear's wide open mouth, and that's the only target I had. In short, we survived the attack, and the what's happened now, though, is that the Anchorage Daily News, when they covered this story, they did a big story then. It was September 29th, 1996, that the article appeared, and it was written by Craig Medred, the outdoors writer. And all this summer, I've noticed that there are numerous articles by this same outdoors writer. When he wrote our article, the entire tone of the article was that we were lucky to be alive for relying on pepper spray, or for relying on bear spray in the bear attack. But now Craig Medred is advising the public to use bear spray for bear attacks. And he had even showed in his follow-up article in 1996 that bear spray doesn't work on, that wildlife biologists showed that bear spray doesn't work on black bears due to a unique protective mucus coating. So they know it doesn't work. And another point is that when the wildlife officials, when they respond to a bear attack, they go in with firearms. They don't go in with bear spray. So they know what the better choice is. But all over the country, this pamphlet is being endorsed to the public to rely on bear spray. So it's really bad advice. And I have this real-life actual experience where I know it's not enough to stop a bear. And so I just wanted to speak because I can't get this information out. I've had a few letters published here and there in newspapers, but there's just an enormous amount of pro-pepper spray propaganda that's in outdoors magazines, National Geographic, all over the place. And like I said, these government wildlife agencies, they're dispersing this information for bear spray, and it's just not enough. So I just wanted to bring this up again because they are considering the reintroduction of the grizzlies. And so that's why I came here tonight and I handed this out. And so I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Bruce Smith.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Smith. I live at 2705 Durbin Court. While you were on break, you had a large pile of material delivered to you, I'm sure, and included in that was a petition from neighbors, my neighbors on Durbin Court and 27th Street and Mill Avenue regarding the design of the new Happy Valley Elementary School. As you saw from those materials, the school district is going to build a new school at Happy Valley Elementary. They're going to construct the new school starting next summer, and a year later they will demolish the old school. For 30 years, Happy Valley Elementary School has been served, its traffic plan has served the school via 24th Street. The school buses and all cars of faculty and staff and students arrive via 24th Street. The district's new design plan intends to open a back door to Happy Valley School and route school traffic down our neighborhood streets, Mill Avenue, 27th Street, and Durbin Court. The district's original plans would have routed as many as 60 to 70 vehicles a day down our neighborhood streets, which are not adapted to that kind of traffic. Our streets are quiet, they have very few sidewalks, very few street lights, and they're narrow. They're not adapted to the kind of traffic that the district intends to put on the streets. So we're asking the city's help to bring the school district to the table and come up with a better plan, preferably a plan that doesn't route district traffic down our neighborhood streets. And that's the help we're asking you. We served the petition on you and the mayor's office, the planning director, and the public works director. We've received some attention from them. We appreciate the help, and any help you can give us would be appreciated more. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Sean Hegstad, followed by Bill Geyer and Wendy Harris.
Good evening. I'm Sean Hegstad from Haven Design Workshop. I'm an architect that's been here for 18 years practicing all types of architecture. We've done many different projects with multifamily and mixed use. And I wanted to bring forward an issue that we've talked about a little bit, and that's the new downtown urban plan. And one of the areas of concern right now is the RT1 zone, specifically south of Holly, between the college and downtown Bellingham. And one of the areas that really concerns me is it's being restricted in a way that none of the other parcels within that, even a bed and breakfast is allowed to have unlimited occupants, unlimited bedrooms. But for the boarding and rooming house provision, it is limited to the definition of a family, basically, so 3-bedroom, and that's it. And so I'd like to have you guys review that and understand that that's probably the wrong provision, considering what the city's trying to achieve with its comprehensive plan, within its density. It needs the density. It's told the county and the state that it's going to get the density, so I think that's important to understand that. And then also there's a provision where it has to go through a conditional use process. The conditional use process is difficult, expensive, and it doesn't guarantee the project's going to go through. And so I would say that, like every other provision within that housing type in that zone, it's permitted outright. It's conditional use for the boarding house / rooming house area. And I think we need to understand that that's an important piece. Because I've done a lot of different multifamily projects, a new concept that's come out is the quad. And so that's a 4-bedroom unit with either 2 or 4 bathrooms. And it's specifically intended for student housing in most cases. But it's something that would not be allowed. And it makes some projects unfeasible if you can't do that. And I think within this zone specifically, it's important to consider that. And I would say in the RT zone south of Holly is the most important piece where I see that, because it's directly between Western and downtown. There's another RT zone that's to the north of Holly. I'm not saying that's a good spot for that. And so I would review that within you guys. So in closing, I would want to say that there's the 2 pieces. There is the conditional use, changing that to a permitted use for the boarding and rooming houses. And then the other piece would be a text amendment to allow unlimited amount of bedrooms within a unit, and they can be unrelated occupants instead of just 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Bill Geyer.
Just one moment.
It's here.
Launch. Okay. Good evening, council members. For the record, Bill Geyer, 1008 16th Street, speaking tonight on behalf of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and would like to, the council received the letter that I delivered to you last week, and all the council members have received that. I appreciate you reading that. Very briefly, to echo some of the policy points beyond what Sean has provided to you, this is from Exhibit F in your council packet tonight, which is the attachment to the adoption of the to the downtown Bellingham Urban Village Plan. Council adopted this first and second at its previous meeting, and the RT1 area that was spoke of, as you can see, is at the south end of the downtown. And one of the things that came about recently is August 21, we had a detailed meeting with the staff, with the planning staff and public works staff, very helpful on prospective redevelopment of the Seventh-day Adventist Church site. And one of the things that came up by nature of previous hearing examiners' decisions calls into question as to the type of housing form that Sean expressed, the quads, and doesn't really fit within the definitions that we have in our zoning code that are based from 1980. But inasmuch that council has unanimously already approved the densities for this area in the Bellingham downtown plan, where it did several things to encourage redevelopment here, taking it to no specific density limit, but set some very clear design guidelines, and this would run through the design review process, which we think is very appropriate. But if you look at the table here, under the land use section, classification A, item 4, which is the rooming and boarding house location, and you'll see that all of that is the only one that has a conditional use designation to it, where the other uses are identified as permitted uses. And so we're specifically requesting per my letter that item 4, A4, be changed on the RT1 from a conditional to a permitted use. It'll allow your goal for redevelopment of this portion of downtown to be much more seamless and transparent, quite frankly. The other technical issue we believe that would help, and it goes to my letter, which I'm going to switch to briefly. I know you have. Oh, sorry. There we go. And that is in the section where it currently has identification as to how you deal with the various bed and breakfast. Your language currently says that there is no express limit on the number of bedrooms as to transient housing. And we are requesting essentially a parallel language here in item 4 that says that there is no limit to the number of bedrooms of unrelated persons. So those two changes would enable the council's direction for redevelopment of this area, because you're giving it its highest density throughout the city, and student housing is a good location there. It's directly midpoint between downtown and Western. If there's other technical questions, I'll be here tonight, but thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. Wendy Harris. Subject says various and sundry.
Good evening, council members. Wendy Harris. I'm hoping to address two issues tonight, so I'll have to be quick. The first is the public access cable programming that was discussed today. I'm very concerned that it turns out that in order to participate, you need to own video and editing equipment. And it was my understanding that part of this program was to provide the equipment to the public and then give them the training so that they could use it. Instead, I see that there's going to be 2 training sessions in the library tomorrow and Wednesday, and Jack's shaking his head no, so I hope I'm incorrect on this, but I want to ensure that this is a program that everybody has access to. If it's only open to people who own video and editing equipment, we're only going to hear from the educated middle class, and we're not going to hear the voices of the marginalized, the disenfranchised, or the young students. In other words, those most likely to challenge the status quo in this administration. And I don't want to see the public access cable program becoming self-regulating and self-restricting so that it's not really public access. And this is exactly why it's a bad idea for the council to write blank checks, because the staff comes and asks for permission to go and develop a program, and you say okay, and then they come back with standards that are different than maybe what the public expectation is, and now I'm standing here with information that doesn't conform to what I believe was what we were being promised. So I also think the process needs to be changed. The second issue I'd like to address is the park plan. And I see that the council agreed in their committee meeting to remove a zoning issue from last and final consideration tonight. And and this was on behalf of a developer and his paid consultant. And I'm asking the same thing as an ordinary citizen. I am concerned that we have an obligation under the GMA to protect open space for habitat and to consider habitat connectivity, and that's not being done. And what we're being told is that'll be taken care of in the SEPA process. But as a practical matter, during the SEPA process, the planning department is determining that it's a determination of non-significance, and there's no requirements to mitigate impacts. And the reality is that intensity of use is an impact. If you're creating new parks or you're increasing the intensity of use in existing parks, that has an impact. And a perfect example is Blowdell Donovan, which was discussed today. We're talking about the stormwater program. We need to have monitoring protocols inserted because it's been 5 years since the Silver Beach ordinance was enacted, and we still have no idea if those stormwater standards are successful. But more than that, what they didn't show you on their map was that further to, I don't know, whatever direction the parking lot's in, there's a wetland and there's a degraded habitat corridor that are not being restored. So what we're doing is we're resculpting the shoreline of the park to make it more accessible to people and pets and their recreational vehicles, and that's an intensity of use. And we're not mitigating it by increasing the buffer around that wetland, which is considered rare habitat that needs to be protected. And we're not making it a priority to restore that migration corridor. And in fact, current plans call for putting more trails adjacent to where that habitat corridor is. And we really need those habitat corridors for human safety as well to prevent vehicle accidents. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Come on up, introduce yourself. You've got 3 minutes on any subject but what's up for public hearing.
Show something on here. My name is Richard Wilson. I'm 5327 Starry Road. About 8 years ago, my wife and I tried to get some property annexed into the city of Bellingham, and at the time the staff said, hey, there's some other people that were looking into it, and we went and started a process, and it was about 300 and some acres, and it was between 2006 and 2008 that this took place. And at the time, Jack Weiss and Terry Borneman and Gene Knutson were there, and they said, you know, there was some issues with some areas, and so we just started it again. We said, okay, enough time has went past. We're shaken off of all the extra work it took, and we've just redid it. We tried to include as much of the UGA as possible, take out some of the sensitive areas, and I was just here to let you guys know we're starting it again. We have a community meeting coming up, and I don't know if there was any questions or concerns from current staff, and I know we've been in touch with the planning department, and they're on board and know it's coming, but I just thought I'd give you guys a heads up and let you know that another one is coming. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought that was going to take a little longer, so I took a bite of chocolate.
I'll take care of it.
Okay.
It's Linda's fault. She supplies us with good candy. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period, and we will move into our first and only presentation of the evening and a public hearing for consideration of an application for Bureau of Justice grant dollars in the amount of $25,834. The police department has applied for a grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance in the amount of $25,834. The application requires the opportunity for us and citizens to comment on the proposed use of funds. Previous council action, I'm going to read this because it's interesting and pertinent. In June, council asked Chief Cook to reconsider buying the Beware software with this money and to find a different use for the funds. Chief Cook decided to purchase protective vests for use in response to active shooter incidents for all patrol officers with the grant funds instead. So I imagine we're going to hear from you, Chief, and then we'll open up the public hearing after that.
Evening, Council. Clifford Cook, Chief of Police for the City of Bellingham. As President Lehman mentioned, we were asked to come back with a different suggestion for the use of these funds, and after some discussion with staff, the recommendation was made to look towards using the monies to purchase equipment that we ordinarily do not have the funding for through our general fund budget or currently available through other grants. So as you have in front of you is the proposal for us to use those funds to purchase a plate carrier vest system for every officer of the department. These vests are used ordinarily in what we refer to as active shooter situations. For the general community, most people would associate those incidents to include shootings at schools, mall settings. As you know, we've had a number of those types of serious incidents across the country, some as close as the city of Seattle. But for me, it entails additional types of calls where we might expect our officers have to face individuals armed with weaponry that our current uniform vest will not stop. So to properly equip our officers and to ensure their safety, we are intent on spending this money for these vests. You should have received a photograph of the vest. Quite frankly, the photograph doesn't really give you a perspective. I think I want to clarify that so people here tonight and those that are watching understand what this vest looks like. So I'm going to take this up so you can pass it along.
Great.
This is to be worn in conjunction with the officer's current under uniform vest. It's a heavier material. It's made to ballistically stop the penetration of certain types of high-powered weapons or ammunition that is intended to defeat a vest. As you can tell when you hold it, it's not a very light piece of equipment. It is intended, as I said, to go over the uniform It's to be used for those incidents. It's not something that's conducive to what some people in the community might be concerned that would be similar to a crowd control equipment. This is strictly for purposes of further protection of the officers when faced with someone armed with a weapon that could penetrate their current issued vest.
Okay.
Much more solid feel than the old flak jackets.
A little smaller too, Terry.
Yeah,
I
it
think.
is. I was going to say it's a lot less bulky, but heavy. Yeah.
Any questions or comments for Chief Cook before we open the public hearing? Anything else from you, Chief?
Jack.
Oh, sorry, Roxanne and Jack.
Due to the weight, would that slow an officer down?
Well,
Not as much.
I would say that our officers are going to enter a situation like that cautiously, although the tactical changes in the way we address particularly active shooter situations at schools is no longer to wait for SWAT or a massive gathering of resources. The expectation is our officers will go in as they arrive. The intent is to confront that threat as quickly as possible. So to the extent of would it slow them down, I don't think so. It is a little bulky, but it's not as bulky as some of the older, as Terry mentioned, some of the older types of equipment that used to be provided for that purpose.
Thank you.
Jack?
So this is the same type of equipment that the county is requesting?
Yes.
Okay. There's one person signed up for our public hearing this evening. That's Gaithia Weiss. So come on down, Gaithia. And if there's anyone else who would like to speak, come on down at this time and introduce yourself before speaking.
Hi, my name is Gaithia Weiss, and I am not so much here to speak against this particular application, although looking at the size of it, it seems small, and I hope it doesn't give the officers a false sense of confidence. I hope it covers enough. But I think that what I want to speak to is the general idea of these Homeland Security grants, and I appreciate that the chief has resubmitted this grant. I think it really is a new and improved version. But I think it is important to realize this is a national phenomenon, these grants, and that it is part of a switch in concepts of policing towards a more militarized version, and that militarization is not only affecting how police respond to incidents, it's changing how the public views police officers, and I think various news stories illustrate that. I just returned from Ithaca, New York, and in Ithaca, New York, their police department, like a lot of police departments right now, also was applying for the same program. And in that community, that was met with petitions by several hundred citizens in opposition. So what I think I want to talk about is that sense of militarization and how do you go into these incidences and how do we best protect the public. And so what I am trying to encourage is that along with having these vests, that we make sure that we have a police department that is well trained. I have only peripherally been involved in 2 such incidents, one which was darned inconvenient for me because I was removed from and kept out of my neighborhood for 5 or 6 hours while people tried to figure out if they could talk this guy into putting his gun down. In a different community, they marched right into an explosive incident with an explosive person, and it was a 15-minute case of suicide by cop. Bam, with the SWAT team. So how you are equipped obviously affects how you respond. It affects how people respond to you. So what I'm hoping is that this whole episode nationwide inspires our National Department of Justice to come up with new funding programs, or at the very least, we do a lot of heavy thinking about how we portray and create and fund and train for a very community-oriented sense of policing. And that is what I wanted to talk about. And in conjunction with that, I brought a scientific article which is talking more about what he's saying he doesn't want to use these for, and I hope he's right, crowd control, and how crowds are basically not things that get driven by the radicalist, most fringe of members, and they're fairly cooperative things that can be induced to behave very socially correctly and helpfully, and that policing that involves merging in with that in a way that's friendly actually can have very positive results. So I'm hoping to distribute this and that you will read it carefully, and wishing our police department well.
Thank you, Gaithia. Anyone else who would like to speak? Come on up at this time. Thank you.
Wendy Harris. I'd like to support what Gaithia says and be a little more blunt. I'm concerned that this kind of armor provides the appearance of safety, but not the reality of safety, based largely on a lot of the studies that she's done. Sociology studies, psychology studies show that when police are more militarized, it creates a different reaction in the crowd that's more likely to lead to violence. And I don't know what the different options are in the grant that's being applied for, but I wonder if there's any that have to do with negotiation skills and things that are more moderating. And you all know me. You know I'm a very vocal person, but you know I'm a law-abiding person. And I stand here as someone, and I'm going to say it, I'm afraid of the police. And here I am, just an average law-abiding person, and I can't be the only person that feels that way. I was there when the eviction happened for Occupy Bellingham, and it was a frightening, traumatic experience. And I stood at the line. They told us not to go over, eyeball to eyeball with the police, and they were not joking. And that's not the only incident I've had where I've been a little bit frightened of my encounters with the police. On the other hand, I want to say I understand that our first priority needs to be protection of the police because they protect us. So I understand where they're coming from, but let's make sure that that's real protection and not the illusion of protection. And I just did some quick research about police personalities. And everyone, you can talk about lawyer personalities. We all have personality traits, and nothing's good or bad. But the police personality was, compared to the general population, cops tend to be pragmatic, isolative, prejudiced, conservative, suspicious, cynical, assertive, and action-oriented. And that's probably not a coincidence because a lot of those are the types of skills you need to be a good police officer. But those are also the types of skills where if you're feeling very self-confident, you might tend to be a little more assertive in a situation that could create some violence. So again, I support the police. I want you to be safe. And I know and my brother was a police officer for a time. So I know that when police go out and do their job, their number one concern is safety because they're going into dangerous situations and they don't know what they're going to face. But I also want to balance that with the reality of the situation and the feelings that that's going to engender in our community. So I know that this is just really an opportunity for us to speak and for the police and the council to listen, and it's not going to change anything, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. This item was for information only, but is there anything any council member would like to ask or say before we move on? Michael, and then Terry.
I'd like to ask for a reaction from Chief Cook. It seems to me maybe it's a simplistic division, but a useful one nonetheless between defensive and offensive capabilities. And I think I share some of the concerns. If the police are militarized, people are saying in a kind of an offensive, attacking sense, that's quite different from this, which is a protective sense. That's how I'm reading it. Is that I'm not a police officer, I don't know. Is that a realistic way of reading it, that protective measures, defensive measures are psychologically different than offensive measures?
Well, I would argue that it depends on the context. And I think this piece of equipment represents a realization on our part that in spite of our best efforts, and there is an ongoing debate in this country on firearms and access to firearms, the reality for our officers is that they face those situations and have faced those situations in this community. I believe it's unfortunate that some people may be fearful of police officers. I also believe it's unfortunate that some equate past incidences in this community with an indication that this is a non-caring department, a non-sensitive department. It is not. I think the one example that was cited where, unfortunately, Gathia was inconvenienced for several hours while we tried to talk an individual out of a situation, that's representative of our tactics. Those are the things that drive what we do, the interest of life preservation, both of the officer and the civilians that are involved in those circumstances. I was not here for Occupy, although I know from talking to my staff that that went on for quite some time. But I can point out also that in spite of the belief that some people may have that it was intimidating, that equipment that they were wearing was not this equipment. It was a different type of equipment. It's protective gear. It's meant to protect the officers from what potentially could occur in those types of settings. I think the one or two points I really would like to make about this agency, beyond those I've already stated earlier, is that we are not, as a police department, currently on the list to receive military surplus. We have not been for the last 3 to 4 years. The last pieces of equipment received directly from the military was a van that was used to transport personnel, and we no longer had a use for that vehicle, and we turned it over to a nearby agency that had a use. The other piece of equipment was some equipment used by our bomb unit when they're faced with defusing a device or investigating a suspicious device. There have been references made previously by others in the community about the appearance of our SWAT team. Quite frankly, if we wanted to or could afford to dress them in a variety of different uniforms, dependent on the terrain and the occasion, we could, but we don't have the money for that. We made a selection on uniforms that was based upon what worked best across a spectrum of different environments, both urban and non-urban. I know there was criticism in regards to the Laurel Park riot. I won't refer to it as the other riot. In our use of an armored vehicle, and I would remind people that our officers stood by or sat in their vehicles while they endured an hour to an hour and a half bombardment of different types of missiles thrown at them, to include rocks, bottles, and dishware, if you'll recall. Our department suffered several $1,000s worth of damage to our, what I would call our normal vehicles, our patrol cars, before that SWAT team was called in with less lethal equipment to disperse that crowd. So I think those are indications, or past incidents that indicate that the first thought this department has is to try to defuse the situation, to try to interact with members who are in times of stress with the intent on preserving life. But we also have to concern ourselves with the preservation of the lives of our officers, to allow them to function in a role that, quite frankly, many people would not do. I'm appreciative that some people admit they don't understand our role. I would offer them the opportunity to try to understand our role, ride along with our officers, come out and experience what they experience. Try to understand sometimes the situations that we walk into or are faced with that provide minimal information beyond what we can visually see at the time. We are trained well. Our negotiators are trained well. Quite frankly, I would like to see further training as well, but that's a matter of budgetary constraint. But we have a very well-trained agency, I think an agency that's sensitive to the needs of the community and their interactions with the public. And that's something I would like people to consider. I understand what is occurring across the country. I appreciate the criticisms that my profession is under, but I would also appreciate the consideration by members of our community to look at the very agency that serves this community and consider the type of service that we try to provide in a professional, caring, sensitive way. There are times when that sensitivity might have to be diminished somewhat because we are dealing with someone who is violent directly towards us or towards the others. That's the nature of what we do. So it's my opinion that this is a necessary piece of equipment. I hope we never need it. But I have to be a realist, too. And part of my responsibility as chief is to plan for the worst-case scenario, because I would not want to sit before this body or this community and explain how one of my officers did not have access to this type of equipment should the need arise.
Thank you, Chief. Well said.
Thank you.
Terry.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Chief, especially with this. This is a basic piece of safety equipment. This isn't a militarized piece. When I sat over in juvenile, working for juvenile court, I had one of the old flak jackets in our drawers in case of those situations. People that have never been in the situation where they are in harm's way, where there are guns involved in other situations, have no idea. You know, unfortunately, I have been through the military and others and been in those kind of situations. This is a basic kind of piece of safety equipment. We live in a society right now where there are so many guns available and the types of armaments that are available. It's just incredible what damage can be done with, and we don't want to police the use of armor-piercing bullets or all the different kinds of assault weapons. We want to be able to make those readily available to everyone, and then we want to criticize the police for wanting to wear some body armor. Well, this is just, I think, is a basic piece of equipment here. I do feel bad that citizens would think that they are just, this is just an exercise to speak, and that we're not going to, it's not going to make any difference, because in a previous hearing on this very kind of situation, people spoke, and the council did state that we didn't agree necessarily with the police at that time. So citizens speaking, we do listen to what they say. Just because we don't follow that action doesn't mean we aren't listening and considering. It means at this moment we don't necessarily agree, and we think this is maybe is a good kind of thing. So we are listening, but for this is, and I'm going to be talking a little later in our next report about a study that the police are doing that kind of leads right into this kind of thing, and the way that the new chief is looking at things. I think, for the most part, our police department has done an incredible job in terms of how they handle situations. Occasionally, you know, the Occupy, I've got some questions about the kind of equipment that was used or was that needed. But for the most part, I've seen the police work with big demonstrations and allowing things to go on and work with people willing that want to protest and do other things and work with that. And I applaud the direction that you're taking the police department, because I think it is in a good direction towards more proactive policing. And I think that's what Bellingham has been known for the most part. So I think this is a good use of the grant money.
Thank you, Terry. Pinky?
I want to thank Chief Cook for going back to the drawing board on this grant. I know that probably wasn't easy, but I think what you presented to us today is a really great solution. I like that it's a direct safety measure for our officers. It does not seem that intimidating for how heavy and strong that is, and I don't feel as though there's a military aspect to that, and I don't think that it seems any more threatening to the public, but it does provide more safety, and I definitely support it. Thank you.
Gene?
Yes, this is anything we can do and anything you can do as chief to protect the men and women who protect us is greatly appreciated. You know, this is not Ithaca, New York, it's not Ferguson, Missouri, it's Bellingham, Washington. And there is a distinction in Bellingham, Washington. When Chief Cook first came aboard, he mentioned the type of camaraderie we had within the police departments all across the state about Bellingham. So, you know, folks, I understand we live in, and you know, we live in a different time. And when I first was elected to council, one of my first tasks was to go on an 8-hour shift with a police officer. When I got out of the car, when I got home, I kissed the ground, because it was it was unbelievable what I saw, and that was 20 years ago. So, I mean, it's amazing what you people do every day when you put on your uniform. So, good job.
Okay. I guess I'm just going to add, if you are fearful of a police officer in the city of Bellingham, please reach out to our department, make friends, build a relationship, learn more. Can only benefit. We have a wonderful police department, many tremendous public servants that serve all of us there. We all pay taxes. We all benefit. So I just ask folks to take responsibility for your fear if you have it, and let's build some more community. Thank you, Chief Cook. Okay, moving on. We're going to move into committee reports from this afternoon. And here we go. First up was a pretty full Public Works, Public Safety Committee this morning with Terry Borneman chair.
Thank you, Kathy. Public Works, Public Safety Committee had 4 items before us today. And the first was a police staffing and deployment study. Last year, the Bellingham Police Department contracted with Edico Solutions, Inc. to complete a patrol officer staffing and beat workload alignment study based upon our current community policing service model. The study has been completed. Chief Cook and Mr. Tim Friesmeier of Edico Solutions provided a brief presentation on the study's finding and recommendations for the Bellingham Police Department. This was a really good report, I've got to tell you. I really recommend that other council members do go back and listen to the report and take a look at the handouts. It was a very data-driven study that looked at efficiencies, how to derive efficiencies from the police department, looking at the appropriate kind of staffing, the proper beat design, how to look at that, the optimal kinds of deployment, and accurate data collections. And one of the things that they were looking at with it is trying to get to the appropriate staffing so that you can get to appropriate mix of proactive and reactive time. And I think that was some of the things we've heard in some of the testimony. The more proactive time that the police department in community policing, reaching out to the community, getting to know their distinct neighborhoods and things, and the people and the players in that, the more efficient they can be in doing their job. And it also puts the kind of face we want on the police department. I think this is a very good report, and I was just really impressed with it. Now we have to take this information and work with Chief Cook and try to get to the level of appropriate, of getting the efficiencies that we need out of this, and looking at what is the appropriate staffing, as opposed to looking at, oh, this community has this amount, so we need that. You know, that's, as Chief was saying, that's not the model we want to look at, comparing just numbers and applying them to populations, but looking at the actual data and how that works in terms of doing it. So it was a really good report. It was for information only today, and thank you, Chief. That was a good report. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the next item we had before us was regarding a High Street closure through Western Washington University's campus. Western Washington University has had permission to close High Street for limited hours through the campus corridor since 1976. With the growth of student population and increased pedestrians and multimodal traffic, university officials are requesting to amend the original part-time closure ordinance to a full-time closure to private vehicle traffic for safety precautions. High Street will remain open to public transit, emergency vehicles. Let me see. Just a minute. I lost my place here. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we'll amend the original part-time closure ordinance to a full-time closure to private vehicle traffic for safety precautions. High Street will remain open to public transit, emergency vehicles, bicycles, and university vehicles. The full-time closure will not impact transit service. Both university and city officials have received support from the surrounding Seaholm and South Hill neighborhood associations. The ordinance that's before us, there was one change that was requested from the Public Works Department, and that would be on at the bottom of page 8, the second to the last line. It says the subject portion of High Street shall be permanently closed to vehicular traffic. It was requested that word permanent be deleted because it could be come open at some other point. So, but with that change, the committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, the next item was a request for council to authorize night paving for 2014 overlay. Staff are requesting that council approve a noise ordinance for night paving on 14th Street, Electric, and Hawthorne to minimize daytime disruptions. Activities will be limited to 2 nights maximum in each location. Various outreach activities are planned to inform the public. The committee recommended approval, and I so move.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. And the last item we addressed today was the bicycle master plan. We had a work session. The 2014 City of Bellingham Bicycle Master Plan is a result of over a year of citizen steering committee, consultant, and staff input. Establishes a recommended bicycle network that the city will strive to implement in the future, an objective prioritization methodology based on the bicycle master plan policy goals resulted in a prioritized list of 186 projects categorized as short-term 2014 to 2020, medium-term 2021 to 2026, and long-term 2027 forward. The BMP includes strategies for funding and implementation and moving forward, which provides a foundation from which recommended bicycle networks and supporting programs can be implemented. Today, we made it through 10 of the 20 questions that Jack submitted, and we haven't gotten to Michael's yet. We have asked for, so we're going to set up another work session in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I've asked that if Michael has questions, if he could submit them in writing, and hopefully staff can provide answers in writing so that we can read them through and see if, so if we can get through them in a timely manner and bring our recommendations back to the full council. And end of committee report.
Great, thank you, Terry. Next up was Parks and Recreation with Roxanne Murphy, Chair.
Thank you. So Parks and Recreation had one single item today, and it's bid award for Blow Del Donovan Park improvements. So this grant-funded project will mitigate nutrient and bacteria loading attributed to stormwater runoff at Blow Del Donovan Park. The work for this project would include construction of drainage and treatment facilities, removal of an existing failing concrete bulkhead along the shoreline and other shoreline improvements. So this contract received unanimous approval from the Parks and Recreation Committee, and I move that we award the bid to Matia Contractors for these park improvements.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 7-0.
We also had one little discussion item that we got pretty excited about. You may recall that the bridge over Whatcom Creek near Ellis Street burned down. Well, we are in the process of replacing it, and we just got a major section of the bridge placed. And we'll be doing other work on either side of the bridge, and we hope to have that bridge back open by the end of this month. So that was good progress and good news. End of committee.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. Okay, this afternoon, Committee of the Whole, we had 3 items. One was a public access TV update. The pertinent items from that, that probably are that there are 2 information sessions this week. The first is tomorrow at 7 o'clock at the library. That's September 9th at 7 p.m. at the library. And then Wednesday at 1 p.m., same location. And that would be September 10th. And then Monday, September 15th is when we'll start accepting submissions for content and anticipating that we'll begin airing public comment or content from the public on Sunday, October 5th at 6 p.m. There was a question about training. Jack, do you want to jump on that one?
Wendy and I talked a little bit earlier tonight about some of the information that was expressed to public comment. The information meetings that are happening tomorrow and Wednesday night are the introductory meetings to the public to just kind of fill them in about what the overall nature of the program is. There will be a request for proposals for some group or people or person who will provide training for the public at a future date within the next few months. On top of that, at the end of this meeting, we're to go and do a third and final on an ordinance that will provide $15,000 for equipment, of which that would include field kits. That would be like a camera and a microphone, other sound equipment, lighting, that would be able to be checked out by the public so that they would be able to film their own programming and to be able to submit it with high-quality equipment associated with it. So, we are doing what we had discussed before, and I think it's going to be a very good program.
Great.
I'm excited to see it roll out.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Anything else on public access? Okay, seeing none. Our next item was an update on the Georgetown University Energy Prize. The City of Bellingham has submitted a letter of intent indicating that we'd like to participate in this competition, and we were notified last month that we have advanced to the quarterfinals with many other cities, but still, that's a big deal. And so this fall, we'll be working on updating our climate action plan and our energy efficiency plans for the competition. Our next goal is to make the top 10 cut. And we only have 51 cities to beat to be number 1, but I think we have a good fighting chance. So fingers crossed there, and lots of good work is going into it. It's very exciting stuff. The grand prize is $5 million, I believe, to put toward energy efficiency projects in our city if we win, which we will. Okay, next up was an update on the Army Street project from the Public Development Authority. And essentially, we got an update on the market research that's been undertaken as part of the due diligence work for the amalgamation of a number of properties that's called Army Street in between the waterfront and downtown Bellingham. Essentially, the market analysis came back with some really interesting findings that have ramifications far beyond just this one property. It was really excellent information that we got back, but a couple of the key findings. I was excited to hear or to see in writing officially, overall, the time is good to consider a catalytic development project in downtown Bellingham. That's great news. That's really great news. And, you know, what that it looks like exactly may be still up for discussion. Specifically, removing the hotel, including the conference hotel from this project concept is recommended, focusing on housing, keeping Class A office space under consideration, but that's still a little more tenuous than housing. There's some interesting information on the feasibility of parking, but we learned a lot from this, and it'll be good to get a full update at our next meeting on September 22nd. Anything else anyone wants to add to that? No? Okay. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve from August 4th and August 11th.
I'll move August 4th.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for,
That's the one you were on.
no, he was gone for the 11th, was, yeah. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve minutes from August 4th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. I'll entertain a motion for minutes from August 11th.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve these minutes from August 11th. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. Minutes pass 6-0 with Jack Weiss abstaining. Is there any other old or new business for this evening?
I think under old or new business, I'd asked that Agenda Bill 2464 that was set for third and final be pulled for discussion of the item that was had been brought forward by Mr. Geyer about looking at changes to the development tables, and I see Greg is here, and I talked with him previously about it before bringing this forward, and just wanted to bring it forward for discussion for the council to see what
Great, thank
folks
you.
thought of this. And
Are you, considering doing that now or at the time that we have our
well, I'm
third
not
and
sure
finals?
if we should do it.
We normally, in the past, we have done it at the time that we're doing the third and finals, and we
Okay.
just kind of take a break and talk and then vote. But
However,
we can do whatever.
I don't know how to.
Okay, so yeah,
we can-
I'm open to that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
what does that mean? We discuss now and then we wait to make the actual changes at
Oh,
third and
we've
final?
already voted. Oh, did we vote this afternoon? We've already voted to take
We
it out
pulled
of
it
there.
off
And we
the-
pulled it off,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, we voted to pull it. We voted to pull it off to have a discussion
Yeah.
of it, and so I didn't.
It's no
wasn't
longer
sure.
part of the consent agenda and we can discuss it now.
Well, not part of the third and finals.
Oh,
Yeah. It can be done at third and final. I have to make the change.
It doesn't
I
matter.
see. Michael?
I would just suggest that we do it at the beginning of the third and final readings, which will be in 4 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Greg's sitting right there.
I don't. Yeah.
It's right there.
Well, I like that idea. Greg,
Okay.
just sit tight for 1 second.
Yeah. Sorry, I
Okay.
brought you up early.
It's okay. No, that's
I
good.
just wanted to make sure
Thank
we didn't
you.
forget it.
Is there any other old or new business we want to mention this evening? Okay, seeing none. I can recap this afternoon. Terry introduced, well, we took this item off the consent agenda. Another item Terry asked for was approval for him to work. Terry is council president pro tem. So he asked for approval for himself, himself,
We got it.
me, you, to work with our city attorney, Peter Rufato, to come up with a framework and a process for the appointment of a new council member to take my position when I step down at the end of the year, 1 year early, to take a new job outside our community. The job is in policy development for climate change work, and I had an article in the Bellingham Herald a couple weeks ago. I think there were 2 articles, So in case anyone hadn't heard, I thought I should probably reiterate that that's why Terry has moved this item. And then also Roxanne brought up interest in, I hope I say this properly, declaring Coast Salish Day in the city of Bellingham in place of Columbus Day. Okay, that was just an idea she wanted to put on the table for now.
I'll be working with Councilmember Borneman and Councilmember Wise to bring a proposal forward for consideration for Committee of the Whole.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there any other old or new business? Seeing none. I'm going to move now into consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor's report.
I'll be brief.
Hello,
Brent
Mayor.
Heinrich. Sorry. Brent Heinrich, Mayor's Office. The Mayor is seeking your approval for the reappointment of Gene Milius to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second for the consent. Yeah, we do. This is not consent agenda, it's third and final what we pull out. Okay. We have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes 7-0. Final consideration of ordinances.
Linda Lou, do some talking.
This is a first for me that we pulled something off the final consideration.
I was just telling Marie, so stuff like that hardly ever happens, and then comes up tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully I will get through this without my nasal stuff causing havoc. Agenda Bill 20481, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham relating to the comprehensive plan and zoning, amending the South Neighborhood Plan and Bellingham Municipal Code Title 20, South Neighborhood Table of Zoning Regulations.
Move third and final?
Second.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Gene Knutson.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20466, an ordinance related to land use planning and zoning, amending BMC Chapter 20.25 for the purpose of adopting thresholds under which design review is applicable in the waterfront district, adopting a waterfront design review district map, and repealing BMC Chapter 20.39 mixed uses.
Move third and final.
Second.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Gene Knutson.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Excuse me. Agenda Bill 20465, an ordinance amending Bellingham Municipal Code, BMC Chapter 17.82, to adjust the boundaries of targeted Area 1 in the city center.
Move third and final.
Second.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Gene Knutson.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20283, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham relating to land use planning and updating Chapter 7 of the Bellingham Comprehensive Plan with a new Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan.
Move third and final.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. I'm out of order.
You guys, give me
Sorry.
a goofed up.
Sorry, Linda.
Jean, aye. Kathy?
Aye.
Aye. Michael Lillquist? Roxanne Murphy?
Aye.
Pinky Vargas?
Aye.
Jack Weiss?
Aye.
Terry Borneman?
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. I'm gonna do them backwards one of these days.
Yeah, right, she's going to catch you, Jean.
Agenda Bill 20261, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham relating to Bellingham's comprehensive plan, amending areas 2 and 3 of the Cornwall Park Neighborhood Plan and Section 20.00.050 of the Bellingham Municipal Code.
Move third and final.
Second.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20214, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham relating to Bellingham's comprehensive plan, adding new subareas to the Samish, Happy Valley, Cordata neighborhood plans, amending each comprehensive plan land use designation map, and amending BMC 20.00.045 Cordata neighborhood table of zoning regulations.
Move third and final.
Second.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20496, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham relating to the Bellingham Comprehensive Plan, amending the Sunnyland Neighborhood Plan and rezoning the properties formerly owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation, DOT, within areas 1, 1A, and 8 of the Sunnyland neighborhood, amending the neighborhood plan, land use map, zoning map, Bellingham Municipal Code, BMC 20.00.200 and BMC 20.28.020.
Third and final.
Second.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
No.
Jean Knutson. Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 6-1. Okay, is this the one you wanted to talk about? Agenda Bill 20464.
Okay, Agenda Bill 20464. We took it off for discussion. Let's discuss. Greg, you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Greg Ockett, Planning Department. We're not opposed to this change. In fact, we think it's probably a good idea. Two of the goals that we had when we started this downtown plan update were to find ways to encourage more people to live in and around our downtown, to provide areas for growth and also shoppers for downtown business. And secondly, we wanted to make it easier for people to develop in our downtown, and this change would do that. So we think it's a good idea. We would offer that we can make the change by simply changing the table, and I can point you to the page in your packet that would do that. It's page 546 of your packet.
546.
Yes, 546. And I know you've read them all.
We have.
This is the Downtown District Development Regulations table. And item 4 under residential is the boarding and rooming house. And currently in the residential transition 1 zone, which is the area we're talking about, it's listed as a conditional use. We simply change the C to a P, make it a permitted use, and that accomplishes the staff's objectives that I just talked about and also the property owner's objectives. We don't, with respect to the other two requests that Mr. Guyer made, we don't think we need to add that additional text that he was suggesting because the boarding and rooming, the definition of a boarding and rooming house exempts it from that family definition. So that's already taken care of under the definition of a boarding and rooming house. And the maximum bedroom limit only applies to those boarding and rooming houses that get a conditional use permit. So by making this simply a permitted use, we accomplish all of their objectives and staff's as well.
Okay.
Well, this don't look good.
Mike, Jack, what are you pointing at him?
We both raise our hands.
Michael and then Jack.
Thank you. We've seen this boarding and rooming house provision used recently, and it surprised many of us that what sounded like it would be a small house of 10 or 12 bedrooms the most, maybe only 5 or 6, was being used for hundreds of bedrooms, and it was being used under boarding and rooming house ordinance. And I think we've requested or asked staff to review that ordinance, and I believe you agree to roll it into a larger review of housing types. Nonetheless, right now, I think as that provision stands, it's kind of scary and unlimited, and I hesitate to put it in with no limits. Is there a possibility that it could be misused in the way we saw it misused over in Puget? Is there anything to prevent that from happening?
Well, I think from our perspective, the reason that boarding and rooming houses are conditional uses is for the instance that we've recently experienced where one is going into a neighborhood. And you want that additional process. You want that hearing examiner process to address any issues that it might raise. In this case, we're talking about an area adjacent to our downtown. So I think that's the difference here.
Well, but I think that's why the conditional made sense to me. If someone came in with, 40 units, fine, but if they came in with 400, well, I would like it to have a little additional level of review. Either that or do what I suggested before, is let's just go ahead and put a cap in the definition of boarding house and say they can only be X number of units and no more. I mean, I guess I appreciate what the applicant is seeking to do. I just think there's a problem with our ordinance right now, and changing C to P opens up the problem in my mind. There is a problem here to fix it, but I don't think this is the fix.
Okay, Jack?
The downtown is a neighborhood. There are residents that live across the street from this that will be impacted if we get a Puget Sound type of proposal that comes across. I'm a little concerned about just making it, as you said, scary and limited. Could you review with us in summary form, the process of a conditional use permit application? How much does it cost, and what kind of procedures does it go through in order to be able to understand what a proposal is and what kind of conditions would be on it, and also to allow the citizens an opportunity to speak to the proposal?
Conditional use permit is one that's reviewed by the hearing examiner. So there's public notice that goes out to everybody within, I think it's 500 feet of the affected property. The hearing examiner holds a hearing, provides people an opportunity to provide comment, and then applies the law and makes a decision on the appropriateness of the application. So it's a legal-based process. She applies he applies the law in the code, the limits that are in the code, and makes a decision on the application.
So it's basically a one-step to get to an approval process.
In the conditional use permit process, yes.
Okay. So I guess what I'm looking at is that if we have scary unlimited versus a one-step reality check to be able to ensure that whatever the project is, and I don't have a problem with putting a boarding room, boarding house there, but we have seen in the past that sometimes people can go and game the system and put things in there that aren't necessarily in the community's best interest. To me, I'm a little concerned about granting that. And if we have a conditional use process that really does provide that one step to be able to verify, instead of just granting carte blanche to anybody to build whatever in this particular area, especially when there are adjacent residences. And I think we need to be looking after them as well.
Anyone else? Terry?
Yeah, I have some mixed feelings with it because it's right up with our neighborhood about it. But at the same time, would I rather see something with a couple hundred units possible go in in an area between the university and downtown that would provide student housing, or open up the single-family neighborhoods to 200 accessory dwelling units to meet the same need. What is the disruption? I mean, the disruption to the single-family neighborhoods becomes quite a bit more than in an area that's zoned for high density. So we're talking about needing to put in increased density to fit the growth management, and that argument's used all the time of how to bust open single-family neighborhoods with accessory dwellings and other kind of stuff, because we need those units. But then we're having great distress about the idea of putting in higher density in areas that are open for high density. And so I have apprehension about it, but at the same time, I just kind of, so it's not okay here, but to do it to single family where you do one at a time and change actually the definition of the zoning for it, you know. I would rather see the high density in areas zoned for that than to bust out some of the other neighborhoods.
Pinky and then Jean.
I support this being changed to permittable versus conditional. I think it supports our need for infill, and it makes it easier for us to find ways for housing for people, and that, I believe, is our objective. So that's what I'm going to vote. Jean?
I move the proposed change.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Further discussion, Roxanne and then Michael.
I'm also supporting this. You know, we may view this as one step for our process, but I view it from the developer's perspective that this is a timeline consideration. That's not a guarantee of the products that they need to buy. They are working on an agenda that, you know, we need to provide some assurances about. And for me personally, I understand the concern about there being residences nearby, absolutely. But also I think that our bigger concern is we have to saturate this downtown with development. We have to make that happen. We have to make it easier for our developers, because we want that development to occur in these areas where it makes commercial sense to do so, so it less affects our neighborhoods where we don't rely on ADUs to try to get that kind of growth. So I hope that people will support this. That's why I am.
Michael. Then Jack.
I apologize, I wasn't clear. The reason for my objections has nothing to do with resisting density. I think this is part of our downtown. It's an appropriate place for density. The issue has to do with how poorly written our boarding and rooming house ordinances, and this table references that poorly written section of code. So I agree, to me this is not a density issue. This is a place, a very good place for student-oriented houses, but it refers to that particular section of the code, and my recollection is the quads that they were talking about wanting to put in is exactly why the hearing examiner just rejected a proposal that relied upon the boarding house ordinance in a multifamily zone. So I think we're throwing the applicant, if they want to do quads, into a place of uncertainty as to whether or not the hearing examiner, if it was appealed, would treat the RT1 zone the same as the multifamily zone was treated. To me, the problem is with the boarding house ordinance, not with the appropriateness of density in this location. So I don't know. Greg, are the quads going to be allowed if we approve the change from conditional to permitted and the applicant attempts to use the boarding house provisions?
Yes, I believe they would.
It would be a problem.
Mm-hmm. It would be allowed.
It would be allowed.
It would be allowed.
Jack.
So one of the things that we've talked about during the downtown discussion is the fact that we have a ample amount of low-income housing already in the downtown area, and what we really want is a lot of market-based housing. As far as Roxanne, your comment about developers, yeah, this one developer might go and get something like that, but I'm concerned about the other developers in the area that would like to build market-based housing that will not because of this type of housing. This type of housing, let's be honest, this type of housing is student housing that really should belong on campus. And we have a situation right now where the university does not provide housing. I mean, they've put up 105 units in the last, I don't know, how many years? 15, 20 years? And that's it, even though their enrollment has gone way up. And yes, this is a private sector opportunity to go and take care of a public sector need, but I think the public sector, the university, should have, been able to plan for this type of housing. And I think that we are missing the boat when it looks, when we're trying to establish market-based housing in the downtown area. We're creating, through the entertainment district and through this type of proposal, we are basically foreclosing the whole idea of having market-based housing because people will not want to go and live in a very noisy area.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Terry.
I agree partly with what you're saying, Jack, about, it'd be great if the university was putting more dorms and stuff. The university is not going to build any, they've been very clear about it. They are not building housing, but the need for student housing is there. So we end up with places up in Sammy's neighborhood and others way away from the university for student housing. This actually is a location that actually makes great sense for that very thing, because the university is not, regardless of what you and I think they should do and how great it would be, it ain't happening. No matter what we say, it ain't happening. They're not doing it. They've been very clear about that. And this area here is within very close walking distance to the university, close for the downtown and things in it. It is a kind of an appropriate place for that.
Roxanne, and then I'm going to ask for a vote.
My long-term dream for some of the rental registration and rental property issues that we deal with, especially relating to the slums that are rented out, is that we will improve the stock of housing for students in our city. This is a dire need, and I think that long-term, these are the kinds of projects that we need to address some of those key public safety issues.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We have a motion and a second to amend the boarding and rooming house line on page 546 under residential land use classification. It's number 4, and the motion is to change the zoning table under RT1 from a C to a P, making it a permitted use, not a conditional use. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 5-2. And we'll, Michael?
The applicants also brought up the issue about adding some additional language on the number of occupants. I didn't understand, Mr. Alcott, why you thought the addition of that language wasn't necessary for them to develop as they are imagining.
The definition of boarding and rooming houses already says it's for persons other than those under the family definition. So it already exempts them from that no more than 3 unrelated people. So that change is not needed. The bedroom limit only applies to those boarding and rooming houses that have to go through the conditional use permit process. So since this one will not, the bedroom limit does not apply. So we don't need to add that language either.
Okay. We can resume with our consent agenda.
Third and final.
I'm sorry.
Final.
Third and final. There are
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items left.
Agenda Bill 20464, an ordinance related to land use planning and zoning, amending the Bellingham Comprehensive Plan, repealing the CBD, Central Business District, Neighborhood Plan, repealing the 2002 City Center Master Plan, amending the Leonard Streets Neighborhood Plan, including land use areas 8, 12, 13, 14, and 15, amending the Seaholm Neighborhood Plan, including land use areas 2, 3, 4, and 5, amending the Sunnyland Neighborhood Plan, including land use areas 6, amending the York Neighborhood Plan, including land use areas 2 and 4, amending the City of Bellingham Environmental Procedures, Chapter 16.20 BMC, and amending the Land Use Development Code, Title 20 BMC, for the purpose of adopting the City Center Neighborhood Plan, Downtown Bellingham Plan, and associated design standards and development regulations.
Move third and final as amended.
Second.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss,
Aye, with one major reservation.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Jean Knutson,
Aye.
Kathy Lehman,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0 as amended.
It's over, Greg.
Thank you for coming
Thank you.
back.
Yeah,
Greg.
thank you, Greg. Run while you still can.
Excuse me. Agenda Bill 20532, an ordinance amending the 2014 adopted budget and upgrading one full-time position in the legislative department where no additional appropriation is requested.
Move third and final.
Jack Weiss,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Jean Knutson, Kathy Lehman,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20533, an ordinance amending the 2014 adopted budget, upgrading 2 full-time positions in the executive department and deleting 1 full-time vacant position where no additional appropriation is required.
Move third and final.
Second.
Terry Borneman,
No.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Kathy Lehman,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss.
No.
Ordinance passes 5-2. Agenda Bill 20534, an ordinance amending the 2014 adopted budget appropriating an additional $35,000 from estimated ending restricted reserves in the public access television pilot training program and startup expenses.
Move third and final.
Second.
Jean Knutson,
Yes.
Kathy Lehman,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss,
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20535, an ordinance amending the 2014 adopted budget appropriating an additional $15,000 from estimated ending restricted reserves in the Restricted Equipment PEG Fund to provide for the public access television pilot, including training program equipment and startup equipment.
Move third and final.
Second.
Was that Pinky?
There was a second from Roxanne.
Kathy Lehman,
Aye.
Michael Lillquist,
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 20538, an ordinance amending Bellingham Municipal Code BMC Section 2.56.020 to correct a scrivener's error.
Second.
Michael Lillquist,
No.
Roxanne Murphy,
Aye.
Pinky Vargas,
Aye.
Jack Weiss,
Aye.
Terry Borneman,
Aye.
Jean Knutson, Kathy Lehman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 6-1.
With that, we are adjourned.